The GT situation. It's taken me a while to comment on what's been going down in the bicycle industry in regards to GT being paused. If you are in the industry, the bicycle industry as a whole, you saw it coming. And since a lot of people were asking in the comments if I would address the GT situation, give my thoughts on it, I thought I would just do kind of an unscripted view on it since I work in the bicycle industry. And like I said, we saw this coming quite a while ago. This is not going to be my normal heavily researched, heavily edited video, but I digress. I wanted to address it for the community. What a lot of people don't understand really is that GT hasn't really been the GT that we kind of grew up with since Rich Long stopped running it. You know, he was kind of Gary Turner's partner with the whole GT thing. He ran a lot of the day-to-day business of GT. He's one of the reasons GT became as big as it is. Yes, GT is Gary Turner, but I don't think it would have been near as big if it wasn't for Rich Long. Now, GT has been bought and sold multiple times. Right now, if you have not watched my pawn holding video, PON, go back and watch that. It'll give you a little bit of insight into the company that owns GT. Who is GT? It is owned by this company called Pawn Holding. Pawn Holding owns a lot of bike brands. They own brands like Caloi, Cannondale, Cervelo, Derby Cycles, which they own Focus, GT, Iron Horse, Mongoose, Santa Cruz, Velaretti, Schwinn. Suffice it to say, Pawn is a big company. And GT for the longest time has been in this weird, I don't know what you want to call it, like middle ground. Like they're trying to be a bike shop brand. Like at one point in time they had a full line all the way from kids bikes to road bikes to mountain bikes to BMX bikes, but they also had bikes in Dick's Sporting Goods. And to me, this is why bike shops wouldn't go full in on GT, and the bikes weren't cheap enough to really take over the box store market, so sales started to decline. And one thing that always irked me, I can't remember the exact model names, but like GT would have the exact same model name for a bike shop. Let's say it's the GT Palomar. I think that was one of their cheap bikes. We couldn't get the GT Palomar that Dick's could get. It was a different colorway, maybe had a different derailleur, maybe it was $50 cheaper than the bike shop GT Palomar, even though the frames were pretty much the same. But that made it very confusing for the consumer. There was multiple times people came in asking, can you get this GT, but I want it in this color? And I'm like, I can't. That is a Dick's only GT. So there's that. That was kind of annoying. And then GT also did some weird choices in the market. They really went heavy on the GT Grade, if you remember that. Not a bad bike by any stretch of the imagination, but when that came out, all of the ads, everything that we got was for the GT Grade. It was like the mountain bikes were second to this new gravel sport, which I get. Gravel was blowing up at the time, but they really went heavy on it, and it felt like they went too deep on the GT Grade. You know, the gravel sales have started to come back down, and I think GT went heavy in that. So sales kept declining after that. And then the big nail in the coffin, I think, for GT was the La Bamba recall. Head tubes were just snapping off. I think they recalled every one of them. We warrantied some. So as sales are declining, they had a major recall. And then I'm so bad with time frames now, especially ever since COVID. GT went through a rebranding of sorts where they started to try to be a niche bike shop brand again. I think we might have offended some of the GT sales reps when they did come by the shop because we told them that we don't think GT's gonna last, especially with this rebranding. And I'll tell you why. They went from being a Dick's brand, a box store brand, we'll say, who had some bikes in bike shops as well, that did fairly okay. But when they did this rebranding, I'm pulling this like out of my memory, so the prices could be completely wrong, but I remember they didn't have a cheap bike, and they were trying to hit that mid to high-end mountain bike market again, doing like nothing lower than like a 140 mil travel bike, which just in the area of the Charlotte region, I saw this trend of everyone wanting a bigger bike. Like one started out with 120s, then 130s, and 150s, then 170, 180, and then everyone started to come back down. And now the most popular segment in the Charlotte area is typically that 120 to 130 range. That was one reason we weren't going to bring them back in and put them in the shop and try to push them, because they just didn't have an entry-level bike for one, and they didn't have something that really catered to our market. Now, they thought we were crazy when we told them most people in the area wanted like a 120, 130 bike. But without trying to be offensive, they were wrong, at least in the market that we serve. They didn't have a cross-country bike with this rebranding. And I've never seen a bike company come out of a box store and completely do away with the box store market, but still be able to thrive in a bike shop. I've never seen that happen. I've seen a bunch of brands try it. They always fail. So that was like a big red flag. That was something I was like, okay, they're doing this rebranding. They're trying to be a niche brand again. They were trying to be a niche brand like Intense or Da Vinci. These brands that are pretty small in comparison to someone like Giant. And GT's just not that. To me, Pon would have been better off, or GT for that matter, would have been better off just coming out with a different brand name if that's what they wanted to attack, was that market. Pon already has Santa Cruz that kind of fills that market. So I thought it was weird that they were trying to go with this niche marketing thing, but it didn't look like it was going to work back then. Like with the conversation we had, those sales reps, they kept saying like, no, GT is going to succeed. We are going to be a major player in this market. And that did not come to fruition, obviously. But the reason GT is on pause is because it is owned by Pon Holding. Look at everything they've done. I think there's probably a sales figure and a number, a monetary number maybe, that Pon requires these brands to meet. When they buy a company, if that company does not meet those sales figures, they kind of put them on pause. It's very similar to what happened to Focus. We actually dealt with Focus for a while. Focus made some pretty jamming bikes for a while. Focus had a major recall. Actually, funny enough, it was head tubes snapping off. Once that happened, they pulled them from the American market, and now Focus is pretty much non-existent in the American market. I believe they're still in Germany, or the European market, but they are a German brand, so that kind of makes sense. And just like with Focus, Pon's track record of if a company is not doing well, they will close them down, pause them. I keep wanting to say shut the doors or close down or whatever, go bankrupt, but that's not. They just put them on pause. They're not producing anymore. They're liquidating all the inventory. And then maybe in the future, they'll start from scratch and try to revitalize the GT brand, which I hope they do. But suffice it to say, when GT wanted us to start carrying GT again, we told them thanks for thinking of us, but we're going to hold off for now. And they kind of scoffed and walked away. But it was the correct decision, because I would have been, as a bike shop, if they were blowing the smoke up your butt trying to say that GT is going to be this grand brand again, and you invested in trying to sell their bicycles, and then all of a sudden everything's half off on their website. Like, I would be rather angry. Suffice it to say, I hope GT gets back to GT fame. I want to end it on a good note, though. How would I fix GT? Like, little me, how would I fix GT to push them into the market again? So GT, in the name alone, is too well-known and too big of a name to be this niche 150 travel mountain bike brand. Like, look, you can't try to be niche. That's a segment of the market where people want like a small, weird named brand that people don't usually ride in their area. They don't want a company that has been in dicks, and they don't want a company like Giant who makes kids bikes and road bikes. Like, they want a niche brand. And in my opinion, GT should have buckled down on one segment of bikes, like just mountain bikes, no kids bikes at first, no gravel bikes, no hybrids, but really try to make a good quality, like $700 entry-level hardtail, make that 100 travel quality entry-level full suspension. From what I've seen, companies with the name the size of GT, they have to entice the entry-level person that goes, oh crap, like I remember GT, I used to ride them as a kid. I used to ride their BMX bikes. They have to entice them, so whenever the entry-level person that comes into the bike shop and says, I want to try mountain biking, they can see the GT name and try mountain biking. But that entry-level person is not going to pay $2,000 for a bike. They're going to start with like a $700 hardtail. And then you can upsell off of that $700 hardtail. There's two paths that everybody I've seen take that buys that bike and wants to get into mountain biking. They buy the hardtail, they absolutely love mountain biking, and a year later they come back in and they buy like a $2,000 or $2,500 bike. Or A year later, they hate mountain biking, which if you hate mountain biking, then you just don't like fun. And they end up selling their bike. And if you have a $700 bike, a year later, you could probably sell it for $400. If you get into mountain biking with a $3,000 bike, a year later, you're lucky if you get $1,500 out of it. That's the two paths. I think GT should be enticing these entry-level people and selling through their name. But, you know, I don't own a big company. I make dumb YouTube videos, so. But I say that in that manner because I don't like to just complain. To me, if you complain, you should have a solution, or at least try to have a solution. Like, you can't just sit here and nag and say they're doing it wrong, but that's what I would do. But that is not what Pawn does. Like I said, Pawn, I think, has a number that these brands need to meet, and I don't think GT was even close to that number. They've been going downhill for since before COVID. Their numbers have been declining. Pawn didn't close the doors. They're just on pause. But Pawn also owns Iron Horse, and that's been on pause now for like 20 years. So that's just my little rant. That's what happened to GT, the modern GT. Gary Turner, in namesake, really doesn't have anything to do with the GT that just got put on pause. It's a completely different company. Pawn owns them. So if you want more insight into that, I'll leave a link down below to that original video, kind of give you some insight. Don't go too harsh on that video because it was one of my earlier ones. Hopefully I'm getting better at making these. You guys seem to enjoy them. But what would you guys do to fix GT? I would love your thoughts and theories and what you thought about the GT rebranding that really didn't last that long. But again, leave your comments about GT. Let me know how you would fix them. Let me know what you think of Pawn holding. Thank you guys for hanging out. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.